website as noted on this slide. So one last thing about input and participation, this rule is being advertised for public comment. We're currently drafting rule language. Therefore, it is important to us that we have your comments and suggestions for what should be included in this rule. So that brings us to part one of the workshop. So we're going to go over an overview of Rule 6A-7.0715, Florida Administrative Code. First, looking at the authority for Rule 6A-7.0715, Sections 1001.02, paren 1, 1001.02, paren 2, paren n, and Section 1006.28 of the Florida statutes give the authority to amend Rule 6A-7.0715. The rule change is designed to implement Section 1006.28, paren 2, paren A, 1B, Florida statute amended by House Bill 1069 in the 2023 legislative session to include an updated criteria for an objection within the school district responsibility section of the library media and instructional materials training. So here you can see the purpose for the rule development as noticed. The purpose of this rule development is to amend Rule 6A-7.0715 Florida Administrative Code to support the implementation of Section 1006.28 Florida Statute, duties of district school board, district school superintendent, and school principal regarding K-12 instructional materials. The rule amendment will include revising the library media and instructional materials training to include updated information regarding materials subject to an objection that depict or describe sexual conduct. In addition, technical changes such as statutory references are necessary. So first, we're going to review the structure of Rule 6A-7.0715 Florida Administrative Code. So the first two subsections provide an overview of the language you will see throughout the rule form. Subsection 3 through 7 detail the plans and certifications for instructional materials and library media. And finally, subsection 8 provides the templates to be used for submitting certifications and plans and incorporates the library media and instructional materials training. We anticipate amending the library media and instructional materials training. So at this time, do we have any comments on Section 8, which again is where we would amend the library media and instructional materials training, which are incorporated? So if you do have any comments on Section 8, if you please would raise your hand, and then somebody on our team will kind of help us unmute mics and we can go from there. Stefana, if you want to go ahead and go first.
Hi, yes. So I'm aware that you all are adding the objection criteria to the slideshow. I do have some concerns because the selection criteria for media specialists is not the same as the objection criteria. And from what was reported on the first meeting, it sounds as if we're going to confuse objection criteria and selection criteria. That's 1006.40. That was not changed with HB 1069. I'm also concerned that the settlement agreement focused on clarifying with in training and different communications from the state that classroom instruction limits are not applicable to libraries. And we know that many of the districts across the state were confused about the inclusion of instruction review, that whole section in this certified media specialist training. Those two are not the same things. And in the motion to dismiss in Lake County, the Attorney General clearly states that age appropriate for captive audience classroom instruction is not the same as age appropriate for self-selection in libraries. And I would love to see that sort of very clear statement somewhere in this training, because right now there is a lot of gray and we know that this training is confusing. Additionally, one more thing, err on the side of caution and also the threat of a third-degree felony have caused so much self-censorship and over-application of the law. And I think that it is a huge disservice to have language like that in this training when this is going out to professionals who understand. And when you say err on the side of caution, you're saying err on the side of censorship. And if we are a free state of Florida, we should actually err on the side of education. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comment. Michelle, you are up next.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Jarrett. I'm the library supervisor. Thank you. I'm the library supervisor for the school district of Osceola County. And to piggyback off of what the previous speaker said, it would be really valuable for us for the DOE to differentiate library instruction and library materials versus classroom instruction, because that is definitely confusing. We are definitely seeing people across the state applying those classroom instruction standards to their library collections, and that's not advantageous to Florida students. The other thing, again, that we're seeing confusion on is the difference between the criteria for choosing instructional materials and the criteria for choosing library materials, because they are together in the current training.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Chris, you are up next.
Thank you so much for letting us speak. I want to echo both Stefana and Michelle's comments. I had the privilege of speaking with Senator Corey Simon, who is one of the senators who chairs the Education Committee. He did not understand why our training included instructional materials in the media specialist training. He was supposed to be talking with the DOE about that. I'm not sure if he has. That's a question that y'all can answer. But even from his perspective, the instructional material last 10 minutes of the media specialist training did not need to be there. I'm not saying it doesn't need to be a training. It doesn't need to be included in the media specialist training. We do not make instructional materials decisions. Those are the categories like the science department, the social studies department. There's been confusion over applying those instructional material decisions onto library media concerns. Also, I think it's very important that we need to kind of note that health standards need to be looked at in looking at sexual content. A lot of those conversations that happen or are part of health standards should be used in self-selection library materials as well. And I would really like to see some things cleared up, really looking at the new state statute, how we're supposed to choose when challenge material has has sexual content. We've got counties all over the state of Florida using different rubrics and not following process. And we want to make sure that that is cleared up by the Florida DOE. But thank you for letting me speak.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Bruce, you are up next.
I'm assuming that's me.
That is you.
Okay. A couple of things. I'm curious because you say forms. I'm assuming the only form that's being changed is 8D, as appears in the rule, which is the training for library media specialists. And I was wondering, I've heard what the other speakers have stated, but I was wondering, since the media specialists were trained on what exists now, I see from what you posted earlier, something you're going to add, and you mentioned that there'll be some technical changes. I was wondering if there were going to be any other changes to the current presentation, such as if anything is going to be deleted or not.
That's a great question, Bruce, and we are still in development, so we're still taking those comments and working on that.
Because I could see from the settlement agreement that might lead to some changes on that, but I don't know if you're planning on changing anything else of substance other than what you've stated in the earlier portion of the PowerPoint about the sexual conduct, which I've heard what other speakers have said about whether or not that should be included. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Ruth?
Hi, sorry, I didn't realize it would let me in and mute the mic. First of all, I just want to thank you, Caitlin, and thank you to the DOE for making this a Teams meeting. I know this is really important for a lot of us, and it affects our daily ins and outs of our jobs. I do want to echo what both Stefana and Chris and Michelle said, and rather than just repeating what they said, I just want to give you a big why. I am the Santa Rosa County District Library Media Specialist, and so I am faced with a lot of this stuff and trying to help make decisions. And I really feel like if we could get something that was as clear as the settlement letter put out to the districts, and the letter was put out to the districts, but if something like that can be included in this library media training, it would empower us so much to be able to follow the law as the DOE and the state legislature intends for us to do. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Cheryl?
Yes, ma'am. My kind of suggestion or question is, in the original training, there was really nothing specific. There were no specifics. Nothing that said, do this, do this, do this. It's all kind of like grading writing. It's all subjective. It's all kind of how each person looks at it, which can be very, very different. So I would like to see the DOE put out a generalized list of books they feel are too sexually content for our schools in the state of Florida, because everybody would deem that differently. And one parent at one school might say one book is not acceptable, where another might say it is. So we don't have any strict guidelines, or we're given no list or guidelines of what was acceptable or not. It's very subjective. So not only is it difficult as a certified media specialist to make those discernments, but think about the schools in the state of Florida who only have clerks. They don't even have certified media specialists there. Those poor people really need some concrete help. And I know we only have 2 certified media specialists for the entire district in our county, and there are a lot of counties that have 0. So those clerks really do need some help. I would like to see the DOE step it up and help in that regard.
Thank you, Cheryl. So next up we have M. Roy. Roy, if you want to try to unmute yourself. I apologize if I get the name wrong.
Okay.
Oh, there we
Can you
go.
hear me now?
Yeah.
Hi, Ema Roy from Central Florida area. I do want to echo what the other speakers have said, but kind of give it a bit of a reframe. This is Autism Awareness Month. I'm neurodiverse, as are my extended family. I want to say how I really miss the days when we could just trust our media specialists to do the job. I know what my job is, and I don't have the expertise in books, but I do have the expertise with my own children. I know that children with autism sometimes access the world through books, So there really needs to be a very strong differentiation between classroom instruction and library accessibility, because sometimes that is how children who think differently or have different operating system, how they learn what's appropriate in the world, including sexually. So, you know, you're protecting these children by giving them access to information. I also want to say that I'm former ESE in behavioural units, and the whole trend and the whole non-specific and vagueness has really affected our community. We're a community that are 6 times more likely to be non-binary. So not only are we talking a spectrum of autism, but other spectrums. And I really feel like I don't belong in Florida. I feel like my children do not deserve to be educated in Florida. I feel like the Department of Education has, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak here clearly. But I really don't know what's wrong with the State Department of Education having specifics, measurables, attainable, realistic, and time-based. You know, I go back to the days when I could parent my children under my beliefs, when other people could parent their children, not enforce their values on other parents. And could we just have libraries accessible? Yesterday in downtown Orlando, I went to a little library opening with one of the representatives there, and it just made me think that those kids with autism going out for their walk in the evening can just walk up to a little library and be accepted in the world, and they can't in education. And isn't that, you know, do we not need to pause about that for a moment? Because it makes me feel incredibly sad and incredibly isolated. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right, so it looks like we are done with comment there. So moving on into clarifying questions and comments. So at this time, we would like to open it up again for comments and questions. If you would, again, you know, raise your hand, and then we can work on helping you unmute yourself to share your input. We'll collect and review comments to inform the next steps of the rule development process. And we've also provided a link to the State Board Rules Under Review site for you to monitor the rule development process. So if anybody else has any comments or questions. Okay, I apologize if I say this name wrong. Please correct me. Michelina, I believe. You should be able to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Oh. Is it on now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right, great. Hi, I'm Michelina Oliva, and I'm from Gilchrist County, and I was formerly from Palm Beach County, which was a polar opposite of where I am currently. I went from a school district of 187 schools to 4. So I've been undertaking a much different change in the type of students that we have, the mentality of the community, things like that, going from a very liberal area to a more conservative area. So just that, and that's just a kind of side note, but it really opens up your eyes, because I know with a couple of the comments, you know, people are just thinking differently at this point. Lots of different places. You have more liberal areas, and you have very conservative areas, Bible Belt areas where people are very Christian versus non-Christian beliefs, and a more mixed bag of tricks, as you might say. You know, the way the United States started as a melting pot, Florida has really developed into such a melting pot of diversity. So the libraries were supposed to be a place where everything was here. Kids could come into the library and find things. Now, hence sexual things, I don't even understand why we would have sexual books in a library media center of any kind. I mean, except for maybe, human body and development, biology, things like that. But it seems that some people are really nitpicking at things. I'm in an elementary school, but I oversee some of the other things and help some of the other schools, which I did in my sister county that I used to be in. And the high schools and we used to talk a lot. And, some parents are just under the belief system that now they can challenge everything. So, sexual contact. David Shannon, has a kid in his book. It's a cartoon and he's in his underwear. And there's a book challenge, not currently in my community, but in 2 other counties. I don't understand. That's not even sexual, Captain Underpants, things like that. There's nothing showing. So it's really gotten to the point where, we grew up reading National Geographic and now all of a sudden that's supposed to be sexual. I mean, it's gotten, so I think that what a couple of the other speakers said, we really need a guideline here. We need something concrete that's not going to be questionable. I mean, sex is sex and you can't make that up. I can't even have the TV on anymore because of some of the TV commercials. That's not even a choice anymore. It's thrown down our throats. Whereas a book, it's on a shelf. So even as a media specialist, if I see a child getting something that's totally inappropriate for them, not based on something sexual, just content that, just because you can read it doesn't mean you should read it. It's a choice. It's on a shelf. You have to actually physically open a book. But I think having an actual list of books, like 2 people said, and having things that maybe are diverse, we really need to be able to have that freedom. And it is a parent's right. It is a person's right and choice whether they read something. But by the same token, all of this, banning of books and stuff because somebody doesn't believe in God and they want all those books taken off the shelf, or they don't want to see a kid that's a drawing like Captain Underpants in his underwear. I mean, where is it going to stop? Harry Potter, somebody said it was witchcraft. Don't teach witchcraft. I mean, when is it going to end?
Thank you so much for your comment. Bruce, we see your hand up again. Would you like to make another comment? Bruce?
Yes, I couldn't unmute. Just 2 other points that I forgot to mention before. One is I suggest you have a realistic effective date of the change where it could be implemented. And secondly, I see that the notice that you had for this workshop stated the limitation. You're considering updating portions of the rule related to the training to comply with changes from the 2023 legislative session. That's all I needed or wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Stefano, we also see that your hand is still up. Would you like to comment again, or was it just up from previous?
I think it was up from previous, but I did forget to introduce myself. I am a public school parent in Orange County. I am also responsible for filing public records and managing a list of censorship attempts across the state for Florida Freedom to Read project. So, my perspective is coming as a parent whose 2 children do not have classroom libraries right now because of the large amount of fear around providing an inappropriate book, but also from someone who has spent countless hours going through documents, showing the amount of books that have been either quietly or publicly removed in this rise of censorship across the state. I wanted to just echo, I understand we do not want a state list of books. But when you all reported out the state list at the end of the year of what was removed last school year, you did not provide clarification over restrictions versus full removals. And for instance, in Manatee County, I'm thinking of Christian the Hugging Lion. That book was not completely pulled from Manatee County. And they reported that on their form, but that's not what your report said. And when that report went out, Suwannee County looked at what you all sent out, and they just went ahead and removed every book that was on your list. So I want to caution against lists. I do think that every community and every school community is unique, and I think decisions should be made at the school level. And I wanted to echo what Chris Smith said about looking at our health standards, looking at topics like human trafficking and sexual assault, and understanding that information in those books or in books and cautionary tales are an opportunity for our children to learn beyond the classroom, looking at the story of a character who looks or feels or resembles their own lives and are going through the same risks and same experiences and pressures. And it can make parents uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. I have, my kids are 8 and 10. But at the same point in time, if they can learn from the mistakes of a fictional character versus making those mistakes in real life, I think it is so important. And I have those parental rights to have that education. It is in our state standards. And I would love to have books that affirm that that curriculum available in the library for my kids to learn from. So thank you for the additional time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I think Lisa, you're next.
I want to echo also what Stefana just said about not having lists, because if I recall correctly, when I took the training, the statute itself says that the books need to be selected that reflect the specific community. So to provide a list is denying that to every school community. They need to be able to choose the books that are accessible, that are appropriate, that reflect their own communities. And what reflects one community may not reflect another community. So I caution also against lists. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And Roy, your hand is also still up. It may just have been from last time.
No, actually, I did want to mention, it says under question and comments, use the chat feature, and then the chat feature is disabled. What I want to say is, sometimes I'm a good speaker, but I'm not always a good speaker. And under the Americans with Disabilities Act, I would like the opportunity to use the chat that it states is available, yet my screenshot shows it's disabled. I also want to say, and I don't know if I said it clearly enough, I am a parent from Orange County, like Savannah, except with much older children. And the whole dynamic that has arisen from this excess censorship, we lost 2 Orange County students to suicide last year, to children that were not necessarily on a particular binary, who had the right to exist and to thrive in education. So your attention to all our voices today is really going to help save lives. I guess I don't want to take up too much time, but I would like, if the chat is going to be usable, if you could enable it again, please.
Thank you so much. And we've definitely taken that. I am not sure if we've kind of been on the side working with some technical things. So we'll definitely look at that moving forward. So thank you. Chris? Okay, that one must have been a repeat from previously.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just have a question about this chat time right now. Are you going to be sharing information? Because I'm just concerned with the chats happening before that we're not going to get to comment on actually what any changes are being made. But if this whole time is just for input, that's something different. I just thought I was going to be getting information about the changes that you're making. Thank you.
And again, you guys are always welcome to use the state board rule under review. Send us an email if that would be easier for you. Any others for Kathleen?
Hello, Caitlin. Thank you so much for providing us this opportunity to make our comments heard by everyone, not just in a chat. I really appreciate that. And Roy, your comments were spot on and well said and well received, so we appreciate that very much. I'm really concerned about cautionary tales, and for so many years taught Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare no less, which, that was my quote, Shakespeare is suspect. So I'm very concerned that the narrow parameters that are being put on what we have in our media centers will deny children the ability, and not just children, young adults, the ability to learn discernment about what's going to happen to them in their lives and what they may protect themselves from. I am very clear that as a teenage rape victim, I would have known much more about what was happening to me and how to protect myself and be safe if I had had access in the 70s, because I'm old, in the 70s to books like this that would help. Next thing with that, though, is paired with research. So as a librarian, from early on, research was my absolute love and joy. And I could have taught myself the same way if books like that were allowed, that talked about human trafficking, women's issues, how to navigate the world in a predominantly still white male world. And we're hurting our students by not allowing all of that information to be available to them. A media center book is not necessarily an instructional material like in the classroom. So that whole determination about if it is used to instruct is very confusing and also damning. Research is self-taught information, not necessarily instructed. So I think we need some clarity on how we can add to our nonfiction as well as our fiction to help support our students moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Any others for comments or questions? Last call. All right. So thank you for your comments, for your questions, and we will provide updates as they become available. You may also monitor changes on the State Board of Education Rules Under Review site. Once again, thank you for attending the workshop and providing your feedback. That does conclude today's workshop. I hope you guys all have a great weekend.